we're seeing these Republican legislators in all sorts of states tie strings onto these school choice bills just the very next session, whether it's Florida or Arkansas or anywhere. So Tennessee, I know you guys just passed one. I think Governor Lee's trying to even expand it even more.
Well, Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to Faith in Action. I'm your host, Matthew Nowlin.
And I'm Shawn Graham.
We lead Conservative Christians of Tennessee, and we are thankful you're joining us today. Conservative Christians of Tennessee exists to analyze political policy and politicians in Tennessee, and all from a conservative Christian worldview. We want to glorify God by helping you to glorify God. So please don't hesitate to send us any questions or comments via email. You can reach me directly by emailing matthew@tnchristian.com.
Or it's Shawn, SHAWN, at tnchristian.com.
If you want to support our work or find links to our podcasts, head on over to patreon.com/tnchristian. Today's show is brought to you in the Memphis area by Herbi-Systems. Give Herbi-Systems a call at 901-290-7774 for all your lawn care needs. Since 1984, Herbi-Systems has been the premier lawn care and landscape company in the Mid-South. So give Herbi-Systems a call today at 901-290-7774 or visit herbisystems.com and let them kill your weeds. Our scriptures for today are from Matthew, the 18th chapter, verses 2 through 6. And Jesus called a little child unto him and set him in the midst of them and said, Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven, and whoso shall receive one such little child in my name receiveth me. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Our guest today is Robert Bortins, who took over a family business known as Classical Conversations. Robert was appointed CEO in 2012, and since then the company has grown by 300% and become the world's largest classical homeschooling organization. He has become the thought leader on biblical worldview in education and culture and is the host of a successful podcast called Refining Rhetoric. Robert's a member of the board of directors of Gutenberg College, the Classical Learning Test, and he's also a member of the C12 group. Robert and his wife April live in North Carolina with their 3 children, and we're excited to once more welcome Robert Bortins back to Faith in Action. Welcome, Robert Bortins.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So, Robert, you have a great book coming out. Shawn loves it. So, Shawn, of course, he's completed his Christian education path with his children. I'm at the beginning of mine. And you cover a lot of models in your book that are beneficial to parents. Shawn's been talking about this as a grammar book for education. But you cover the Prussian school model, which I've heard more about that from Tim Yarbrough, a past guest of the show, than anyone. But you cover Gramsci's Long March. You cover the godless attacks that come from the global education models. So leading up to that, tell us how you and Alex Newman, a past guest of the show as well, came together to write this book, Woke and Weaponized, how Karl Marx won the battle for American education and how we can win it back.
Yeah, I thought it was super important as we were having conversations with conservatives and Christians and Republicans that we understand the ground that we're building upon from our education here in the United States. And people hear about the Prussian model and don't really understand what that means, or that the Rockefellers just wanted to have obedient workers, and that we were having these conversations and people just didn't even know about these things or had heard about it, but just didn't think they were relevant to today's educational systems. And a lot of the reforms and people are working on, just if you look at the history, just aren't going to work. And because I love people, I don't want them to spend their life trying to do something that's not going to work. I want them to do things that will work. And so, yeah, we not just went through the history of education, which, there's other books that do that, and we reference those for those who want to dive deeper into it. But actually did a ton of research on what's actually happening today, who's funding it, and then we look at a couple of areas and communities that are doing it well, and that are having excellent results that people can look at and just really try to explain what people mean when they say things during these kind of educational, gurus. They'll say something and it sounds good, but we break down what it actually means in the book, and it's well researched. Obviously, we have our own opinions, but I think it's something like 12 or 16 pages in the appendix of just all the research that we did. So, yeah, it's going to be a great book for your listeners.
So how did you guys get connected to actually do this? I mean, did you guys just meet at the gold and the Bitcoin conference or what?
Yeah. Yeah, so Alex Newman, his kids use Classical Conversations, and him and I have talked multiple times about school choice, the United Nations, and their plans for your child's education. And yeah, we just thought that it'd be a lot easier if we wrote a book, got it all documented so that people could see for themselves and share it with a friend.
It's a great asset. I'm so glad the two of you put this together with scholarly intent, and you got a great line in the book. And you say, from the very beginning, Americans understood that education was primarily the responsibility of parents, not the state. I think that's so important to get down. Education was not viewed as neutral. You said that it wasn't a technical process, and I think that's where we've devolved it to. Early Christian Americans across all denominations, we understood that the job was to not just to teach, but it was about the biblical disciplines and discipleship. What happened? That's gone.
Yeah, and so that's what we explore in the books and to show how that left. And it started with this idea from Robert Owen. I mean, people probably heard of Dewey and Mann and the Prussian model, but pre-Prussia was this guy named Robert Owen, and he tried to start a communist commune in Indiana at the time. This was kind of predating or kind of the same time as Karl Marx, and failed. Of course, it failed. But what he was trying to eradicate was the trinity of evil, which we all recognize is family, religion, and private property. And he said that it's because these adults hadn't been conditioned to accept those communist ideologies since, from kids. And so he identified that the public school system was the way to do this. And so, he couldn't get any traction here in the United States. 99% of Americans read. We were a well-educated group. The government was not involved in really any form of education. And so it was the church and it was families that were leading it. And they could read Shakespeare. And, we have a test for an 8th grade test from early on in the book that just shows how far we've degraded as a country. And so
I didn't fail, just so you know. When I read through it, I did not fail that, so I was proud of myself for a second.
There you go. Yeah, so it just kind of shows how those ideas have been imported here in the United States. There was a Reese report in the 1950s that the federal government paid for and was presented to Congress that showed what was happening and how these, if you think USAID is bad now, this has been a playbook that was run in the 40s and the 50s by the communists. So it's nothing new. When government gets involved in paying for things, the communists take it over and use it for their own ends. And they took over the teachers' colleges, and then especially World War II, and obviously with the war and so many men gone and women going into factories, that was really when the public school system in the U.S. Took off. And unfortunately, now we are seeing the results of those 100 years since then and we see that about more than half of children are born out of wedlock. Only about 6% of Americans have a biblical worldview, according to Barna. And more than 50% of Gen Z thinks socialism is a good idea. And so that's why the subtitle is How Karl Marx Won and How We Plan to Win It Back. And so there's not a lot of hopelessness at the end of the book. We actually outline ways for us to really have good government and, personal responsibility as avenues for us to win our children's hearts and minds again, and so that we can be a free people.
I feel like I'm hearing a little bit of Colonel Ray Moore popping out in your title. He told me after the school choice debacle in Tennessee that Matthew, no victory is permanent, and in the same way, no defeat is permanent. So I know he likes your book, but am I hearing some of him in this title with the phrase, that Marx has won?
I've known Ray for a long time, and he's been a warrior in this front for educational freedom and independence and Christianity. And so whether it's from him directly or we just run in the same circles of people who love Jesus, love freedom, and love our kids, it's not surprising that we have a similar worldview.
Navita IT Managed Services is much more than a help desk. They're more than a network administrator. Navita IT Managed Service has decades of business consulting and analytics experience. While many IT companies just react to whatever broke, Navita is proactively looking ahead to understand how money, relationships, and people flow through your business. Navita IT Managed Services works to keep your business growing as a healthy part of God's kingdom. They help churches and businesses steward their resources to become the best business leader possible. Visit Navita IT Managed Services.com today to learn more about Navita IT Managed Solutions. Now, we're excited to have a veteran-owned Christian business like Navita on board with us this year, and we know you will love using Navita for all your IT solutions. Listeners, we are back with Robert Bortins. We're talking about his new book on education in America. Again, the title of that book is Woke and Weaponized, How Karl Marx Won the Battle for American Education and How We Can Win It Back. Robert, in this book, you claim the core problem with education comes when the people who pay for something are not the same people who directly benefit from it. And you say that type of system will always drift towards waste, dependency, and control. Can you give us some examples of that? The reason I ask, there's the guy from the meme. He's in his mom's basement. He's got a neck beard, some Frito-Lays in one hand, some Mountain Dew Baja Red in the other hand. He's pointing with his mouth open. He's yelling, "Citation, please." So go ahead and give us some examples.
Yeah, we see this whole entire Obamacare, Affordable Health Care Act debacle. They want to give $40 billion in tax credits a year to these insurance companies, even though these insurance companies have like $300 billion in reserves collectively, and somehow we have to go more in debt for that. Our medical system is just so expensive because the government's gotten involved and pays for it, so you don't actually pay for it yourself. College, even though you're on the hooks for the loans, like you haven't actually spent the time and energy to earn that money to understand the value of money. And so they're going to give you a couple $100,000 to go get some degree that's not going to provide a job for you. And so we see colleges have gotten very expensive, and the value has decreased to almost nothing unless you're going to be like an engineer or a doctor. And so we see the government getting involved in that. There's obviously like locally, we don't have a lot of affordable housing. And part of the reason is we live next to Fort Bragg, and we have all the soldiers get a housing allowance. Now, of course, they're earning that as part of the, part of their service. So I'm not like against that specifically, but what we see here is that every single apartment complex is charging exactly what the government will pay in a subsidy to them. And
well, that repeats in every military town across the United States. How do you get around that? I don't know a way.
Yeah. Yeah. So whatever the government subsidizes, we know price will inflate to whatever they're going to pay, and then the quality is going to decrease because people aren't paying that directly. And all sorts of economists and economic studies have shown this to be true. And so whether it's healthcare, whether it's college, whether it's just all of these housing incentives, like all of these areas, the government gets involved and things get ridiculously expensive. So
well, someone famously said the reason televisions don't cost $30,000 is that the government hasn't gotten involved in manufacturing and distributing televisions. So I agree with you.
Well, I love that you mentioned it before, but you were talking about how your thought here was not just to write a historical book. You were talking about history because we got to know the history to have the conversations, but you don't leave people helpless. This is hope. You talk about the problems, but you also point out that there is a pathway forward. Yes, we did lose clearly to this Marxist takeover of our education system, but tell our listeners, what are a few ways for us as a culture to have hope on winning this culture back?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with taking personal responsibility and responsibility as our local communities. And so, one of the things that we need to do is, every single church in America needs to have a education fund that promotes and provides scholarships for Christian education for low income families in their church. They should be supporting, any sort of Christian schools in their area and encouraging families to go there. We need to have, starting homeschooling co-ops or, private schools. There's all sorts of ways that we could get involved that don't take a lot of money or time. It just takes a lot of intentionality, and it's working. So if you look at Moscow, Idaho, the research I did showed about 30% of kids are not in public school in Moscow. I've heard that number might be as high as 40% are getting a private education. And that was before they passed their little school choice stuff. Here in Moore County, North Carolina, where I live, 25% of kids are not in your traditional public schools.
Wow.
And so nationally, that number is usually around 12 or 13%, about 10% in private schools and about 3% homeschooling. But these areas, whether it's our town, which is almost twice the national average, or Moscow, Idaho, that's 3 or 4 times the national average, and neither of us are doing anything, that's complicated. We have pastors preaching from the pulpit that parents are responsible for their kids' education, and churches that are, putting their money where their mouth is and doing congregants are going to a system that is designed to send your child to hell. I mean, if you look at the research Barna does, 83%, I believe, of kids who are in church but go to public school walk away from the faith. And so, I mean, literally, like I always tell people, I don't want any of you to answer to Jesus for my sins, but I am glad I'm not a pastor leading a flock where 83% of young people that I'm overseeing as a shepherd are going to hell. So
Yeah, but isn't it okay, really, in the end? Because if you give a lot of money to foreign missions, isn't it okay if your own kids go to hell?
God's really clear that any father who doesn't take care of his own child is worse than pagans. And God said,
denied the faith, and it's worse than an infidel.
Yep. And, God says that anyone who should lead a child to stumble would be better off with the millstone tied to their neck and to be thrown in the ocean. And, we might have been naive 20 or 30 years ago and not understanding the just degradation of the public school system, but there is no excuse today for anyone to look at the system and see what's going on. It's all over the news, and you got to be action oriented, or you're gonna have to answer to God for it. So fear God more than man. That's what we really need.
Yeah. So listeners, just in case you didn't catch the sarcasm, for 3 years, really 3 or 4 years, Shawn and I have been saying, churches, consider as your missionaries retire, don't abandon your missionaries, but as they retire, take the money you're sending to retired missionaries, reinvest that into Christian education in your community for your own, whether it be for your own congregants, something very similar to what Robert Bortins' church does.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get African churches sending missionaries to the U.S. pretty soon, if not already.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't doubt that. I remember in the 80s in the Assembly of God, hearing Thomas Trask and George Woods talking about planning for the decade of harvest in the 90s, and they said the same thing. We're going to send foreign missions. That's going to return to us. But looking back, I'm actually kind of angry because we could see this, but why didn't we just invest in Christian education in our own country and change our own trajectory? Every week, it's our privilege to remind you about equipping the persecuted. We've done shows going back 5 years regarding the genocide and murder of Christians in Nigeria. And through that time, there was one group there on the ground doing the Lord's work to save our fellow Christians. And that group is equippingthepersecuted.org. Listener, your support helps real Christians, real people that have been attacked by brutal Muslim jihadists. They need food, clothing, shelter, medical care, help building a new life. And your monthly donation creates sustainable help for people in real need. So please support that work by visiting equippingthepersecuted.org today. You can sponsor an orphan for just $35 a month. Now you can actually order African coffee and have it shipped straight to your home. And every bag of that Equipping the Persecuted coffee that you purchase won't just fill your cup, but it will strengthen the body of Christ, because 100% of the proceeds will go directly to support persecuted Christians in Nigeria. You can try any of their great flavors today. Again, that's equippingthepersecuted.org and the persecuted Christians in Nigeria. Thank you. And once more, listeners, we're back with Robert Bortins, the CEO of Classical Conversations, and we're talking about his new book on education in America. The really shocking part of the title claims that Karl Marx won. Shawn and I agree. So in Woke Weaponized, Robert, you do a great job showing how we got here to this current point. And if our listeners don't know what that is, that current point, then Shawn and I just need to quit and go home, because we talk about it like every
week.
But you also include what may be the real highlight of the book, which is a lengthy appendix that highlights the nightmare, specifically of the Arizona school choice saga, which we warned about in Tennessee before so-called school choice passed. Legislators ignored us, and already they're demanding the quote-unquote, air quote, accountability. And so they avoid an Arizona school choice saga, but are you surprised by this? And the reason I ask is that Tennessee pretty much copied the Arizona model. We talked with you a lot about it before it happened. You were one of our strongest guests showing the problems with this. And I mean, how far along is Tennessee in copying what Arizona has created?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing these Republican legislators in all sorts of states tie strings onto these school choice bills just the very next session, whether it's Florida or Arkansas or anywhere. So Tennessee, I know you guys just passed one. I think Governor Lee's trying to expand it even more. And so
we're going to do food this year, Robert. So this year we're going to start talking about giving away government-funded lunches in this school choice. Isn't that fun? More and more strings.
Well, maybe you can take that money and get Papa John's Papa Bowls so you can go low carb.
Is that extra fudge round, I think. Extra fudge rounds. So, yeah, it can kind of be depressing when you see what actually happens when you told them what it was. And, you know, one of the big things we see is the rise of Islamic schools. And so I think Tennessee already has maybe one jihad school that your Christian taxpayers are funding. And so, yeah, it's filled with corruption because you get this money and you have to spend it or it goes away. So you don't spend it very wisely. Groups, if you're a business supporting homeschoolers, you're able to jack up your prices because now instead of a father working really hard to pay for his kids' extracurriculars, the state has stolen money from your neighbors in order to pay for it for your goods. And so, yeah, inflation's high, corruption has been entering into the market, and we see these jihad schools and communist China schools popping up in all of these school choice states. And so now they're telling us, oh yeah, we knew this was going to happen, but it was a risk we were willing to take. So it's not a risk I'm willing to take with my kids' lives and importing these ideologies and paying for it to be imported.
Robert, we have to wrap, but the most important thing is that you tell our listeners about where they can get their own copy of this book, and then that you tell them about your newsletter as well, because they need to subscribe to your newsletter.
Yeah, so go to wokeandweaponized.com. That is going to be where the link's going to show up. The book will be available. It'll ship mid-January. That is Woke and Weaponized. Sign up for the newsletter because we'll definitely be sharing special insights and more information and behind-the-scenes looks into this book so that you can continue to educate yourself. So that you don't accidentally cause, your grandchildren to not live in a free country because of the decisions we made. We need to be eyes wide open when we're making these laws and decisions.
Well, that's going to do it for another episode of Faith in Action. And until next week, remember, the Lord shall reign forever and ever.